We've all heard horror stories about how badly major music labels treat artists. We've also heard how tough it is to make it as an independent artist. There's got to be a better way, doesn't there? At Fortivo Music, we completely agree, but first, we have to understand the problem we're trying to fix. In this episode of our Business of Music video series, we start by providing some context to frame the issues, and hopefully it'll help all of us with potential future discussions. First, let's start with the basic idea that the primary goal we're trying to achieve is to create an environment where musical artists can pursue their craft on a full-time basis. Now, the only way that's going to happen is with fans. After all, someone has to pay for the artist's services, either directly or indirectly. Therefore, we have to find a way of connecting fans and artists. One challenge is that artists are a diverse group. We can't paint all of them with the same brush. There are a million ways to categorize them, but for the sake of simplicity in this video, we just showed 3 general categories. Creators are essentially the songwriters. These could be musicians, singers, composers, producers, or anyone else creating original music. Another we'll generally call players. These are local bands, cover bands, session musicians, and touring musicians. Also, many of the music teachers might fall into this category. Then there are the stars. These are the ones that want to sell out stadiums, make millions, and enjoy global fame. These are the Taylor Swifts, the Princes, the Beatles. As you can probably imagine, there aren't that many of them. There never have been. We don't really have any hard data on this, but for the purposes of this video, let's just pretend that they make up less than 1% of all musicians in the world. Fans are no less diverse, and there are billions of them. Again, for the sake of simplicity, we broke them into 3 general categories. First, there are the listeners. These are casual fans who enjoy listening to music at work, while they drive, or during their runs. They like to go dancing. They may not know anything about the music or the artists, but they know what they like. Then there are the aficionados, who like to study the nuances of music. They know the history of certain bands, the stories behind certain songs, and the connections across genres. They can be music connoisseurs. Finally, there are the fanatics. In other words, fans in the truest sense. They typically hyper-focus on a single artist, and they know everything about that artist. They know every lyric to every song on every album. They've seen them play live multiple times. They own every piece of merch, and they know every personal detail about the artist. These are the Swifties. This is Beatlemania. They're also a very small minority of all music fans in the world. Again, for the purposes of this discussion, we just picked a very small number of, let's say, less than 1%. So what we end up with is a very complex global music ecosystem of fans on the one side and artists on the other. If artists want to make a living as professional musicians, they're going to have to find a way of connecting with fans in a way that gets them to pay for whatever goals the artists want to achieve. So, how does that happen? Well, the typical answer is artists have to sign a deal with a music label. Which begs the question, where are the labels in this ecosystem? To answer that question, we have to focus on the 2 smallest slivers of each side. These 2 actually can't exist without the other. Fans only get fanatical about stars, preferably global megastars. They don't get that worked up about songwriters or session musicians. They also don't get too excited about artists playing local gigs. On the other hand, stars can't get what they want by appealing to casual listeners or aficionados. Even though there are way more of them than there are fanatics, they're just not interested enough in music to spend the kind of money that would get a wannabe star to the level they crave. If any of you have taken on any courses of probability theory, then you know that the odds of any 2 events occurring simultaneously is roughly the product of each independent probability. So, the odds of the rarest artists actually resonating with the rarest of fans are incredibly low. In our example, less than 0.01%. Which makes sense because we all know how rare it is for artists to make it as big as Elvis, the Beatles, Michael Jackson, Prince, Beyonce, or Taylor Swift. And this is where the labels live. They exist in the narrowest sliver of a narrow sliver within the huge global music ecosystem. We hear about them a lot, but that's only because the stars and the fans make headlines. However, in the big scheme of things, labels are not that relevant to the vast majority of fans or artists. They are laser focused on creating global megastars. There may be tens of thousands of people working at the major labels or in the smaller labels that make up their feeder system, but every single one of them is committed to creating the next Taylor Swift. Every process, every partnership, every contract deal term is also lined up to support that same mission. And there's no denying that they're extremely good at what they do. Global megastars did not exist before the labels, and there has been no way to become a global megastar other than working with a major label. I would love to be proven wrong on this, so please let me know in the comments if you have an exception to this rule. Now, the good news is that only a relatively tiny percentage of artists worldwide ever have to deal with labels. And to the extent that so many people think that the labels are broken and in need of an overhaul, they can be fixed, just like any other business. That's not an area that I focus on because I don't come from that part of the music industry. There are way more competent people than me to take on that challenge, and I happen to know many folks who are doing just that. Therefore, Fortivo Music will not be doing much to try fixing the labels. The bad news is that even if we fixed all the labels, they will only help a small number of artists globally. Everyone else is going to need a different solution. I'm a visual person, and if you are too, then let me try this approach. Let's say the global music community of music artists is distributed along a typical bell curve. On one end of the spectrum are the stars that make up a tiny percentage of the global artist population. We just determined that they're the ones that should pursue deals with music labels. By definition, this means that everyone else, meaning 99% of artists, will be independent artists, whether they choose to be or not. They are independent of the labels. They will have to find other ways to pursue their dreams of working full-time on their music. At the other end of the spectrum are the truly independent artists who have managed to carve out a professional life for themselves. For a number of reasons, I believe that these are way more rare than the megastars. First of all, to succeed at this end of the spectrum, they have to possess the rare combination of skills as musical artists and entrepreneurs, because they will essentially be running their own label with themselves as the only artist. They'll have to be as proficient with finances, contracts, marketing, HR, and logistics as they are with chord progressions, melodies, lyrics, and rhythms. Perhaps more importantly, I could argue that these folks didn't even achieve the same goal, because in order to become successful, they had to stop working on their music full time. They started down this path because they were tired of working retail jobs to pay the rent while doing music only on nights and weekends. But now they traded in their retail jobs for their private label jobs. And they're still doing music only on nights and weekends. Very few people have the skills to pull this off. Very few people want to pull this off. Very few people have ever pulled this off. So where does that leave everyone else? What about basically 99% of all artists who want to pursue a full-time music career? Sadly, I don't have a clean answer for you, at least not right now. However, this is precisely the problem that Fortivo Music is working to solve. One thing I can tell you for sure is that fixing the labels will not help most artists, and neither will trying to become a fully independent artist. And because there are so many artists in the world, and there's such a diverse group, there won't be a one-size-fits-all solution from a single company or group of companies. Instead, it'll have to be an ecosystem of different solutions. At Fortivo Music, we've got some ideas on where we'd like to fit in, but we're just going to be one of thousands of companies helping artists and fans. Hopefully, we'll get an influx of creative minds from outside the music industry, because we can't just keep trying to improve the way we've been doing business for years. We have to really shake up the music industry in a disruptive way, because we'll need to get creative, we'll need everyone's input. fans, artists, marketers, financiers, lawyers, regulators, entrepreneurs, investors, philanthropists, and many, many more. And of course, it will not happen overnight. The age of major music labels has been around for decades and is well cemented in the music industry and in music culture. It'll take quite some time to loosen the label's grip on the global music scene. I know that this video was a gross oversimplification of the complex world that artists are trying to navigate, but hopefully it provided at least a rudimentary framework for analyzing some of the problems artists face in today's society and for creating innovative solutions to help them achieve their dreams. I'm Guillermo from Fortivo Music. Thanks for listening.